Instead, you must find some way to use the adversity, its energy, to help yourself. Before the invention of steam power, both captains had an ingenious ways of defeating the wickedly strong current of the Mississippi River. A boat going upward would pull alongside a boat about to head downriver, and after wrapping a rope around a tree or a rock, the boats would tie themselves to each other. The second boat will let go and let the river take it downstream, slingshotting the other vessel upstream. So instead of fighting obstacles, find a way of making them defeat themselves. There is a famous story of Alexander the Great doing just that, and it was Alexander's masterful use of an obstacle against itself that gave observers their first hint that the ambitious teenager might one day conquer the world. As a young man, he trained his famous horse, Bucephalus, the horse that even his father, King Philip II of Macedon, could not break, by tiring him out. While others had tried sheer force and whips and ropes, only to be bucked off, Alexander succeeded by slightly mounting and simply hanging on until the horse was calm. Having exhausted himself, Bucephalus had no choice but to submit to his rider's influence. Alexander would ride into battle on the faithful horse for the next 20 years. Now, what of your obstacles? Yes, sometimes we need to learn from Amelia Earhart and just take action. But we also have to be ready to see that restraint might be the best action for us to take. Sometimes in life you need to have patience. Wait for temporary obstacles to fizzle out. Let two justing egos sort themselves out, instead of jumping immediately into the fray. Sometimes a problem needs less of you, fewer people, period, and not more. When we want things too badly, we can be our own worst enemy. In our own eagerness, we strip the very screw we want to turn and make it impossible to ever get what we want. We spin our tires in the snow or mud and dig a deeper rut, one that we will never get out of. We get so consumed with moving forward that we forget that there are other ways to get where we are heading. It doesn't naturally occur to us that standing still, or in some cases even going backward, might be the best way to advance. Don't just do something. Stand there. We push and push to get a raise, a new client, to prevent some exigency from happening. In fact, the best way to get what we want might be to re-examine those desires in the first place. Or it might be to aim for something else entirely and use the impediment as an opportunity to explore a new direction. In doing so, we might end up creating a new venture that replaces our insufficient income entirely. Or we might discover that in ignoring clients, we attract more. Finding that they want to work with someone who does not so badly want to work with them. Or we think that disaster we feared, along with everyone else, and come up with a way to profit from it if when it happens. We wrongly assume that moving forward is the only way to progress, the only way we can win. Sometimes staying put, going sideways, or moving backwards is actually the best way to eliminate what blocks or impedes our path. There is a certain humility required in that approach. It means accepting that the way you originally wanted to do things is not possible. You just haven't got it in you to do it that traditional way. But so what? What matters is whether a certain approach gets you to where you want to go. And let's be clear, using obstacles against themselves is very different from doing nothing. Passive resistance is, in fact, incredibly active. But those actions come in the form of discipline, self-control, fearlessness, determination, and grand strategy. The great strategist Saul Alinsky believes that if you push a negative hard enough and deep enough, it will break through its own counterside. Every positive has its negative. Every negative has its positive. The action is in the pushing through, all the way through to the other side, making it negative and making a negative into a positive. This should be great solace. It means that very few obstacles are ever too big for us, because that bigness might in fact be an advantage, because we can use that bigness against the obstacle itself. Remember, a castle can be an intimidating, impenetrable fortress, or it can be turned into a prison when surrounded. The difference is simply a shift in action and approach. We can use the things that block us to our advantage, letting them do the difficult work for us. Sometimes this means leaving the obstacle as is, instead of trying so hard to change it. The harder Bucephalus ran, the sooner he got tired out. The more vicious the police response to civil disobedience, the more sympathetic the cause becomes. The more they fight, the easier it becomes. The harder you fight, the less you will achieve, other than exhaustion. So it goes with our problems. Channel your energy. When jarred unavoidably by circumstance, revert at once to yourself and don't lose the rhythm more than you can help. You will have a better grasp of harmony if you keep going back to it. Marcus Aurelius. As a tennis player, Arthur Ashe was a beautiful contradiction. To survive segregation in the 1950s and 1960s, he learned from his father to mask his emotion and feelings on the court. No reacting, no getting upset at missed shots, and no challenging bad calls. Certainly, as a black player, he could not afford to show off, celebrate, or seen as trying too hard. But his actual form and playing style was something quite different. All the energy and emotion he had to suppress was channeled into a bold and graceful playing form. While his face was controlled, his body was alive, fluid, brilliant, and all over the court. His style is best described in the epithet he created for himself: physically loose, mentally tight, like I am now. For Arthur Ashe, This combination created a nearly unbeatable tennis game. As a person, he would control his emotions, but as a player, he was swashbuckling, bold, and cool. He dove for balls and took, and made the kind of shots that made other players gasp. He was able to do this because he was free. He was free where it mattered, inside. Other players, free to celebrate, free to throw tantrums, or glower at refs and opponents, never seemed to be able to handle the pressure of high-skate matches the way Ashe could. They often mistook Ashe as inhuman, as bottled up. Feelings need an outlet, of course, but Ashe deployed them to fuel his explosive speed. In his slams and chips and dives, in the abandon with which he played, there was none of the quiet prudence with which he composed himself. Adversity can harden you, or it can loosen you up and make you better if you let it. Rename it and claim it. That's what Ashe did, as have many other black athletes. The boxer Joe Louis, for example, knew that racist white boxing fans would not tolerate an emotional black fighter. So he sublimated all displays behind a steely blank face. Known as the ring robot, he greatly intimidated opponents by seeming almost inhuman. He took a disadvantage and turned it into an unexpected asset in the ring. We all have our own constraints to deal with. Rules and social norms we are required to observe that we would rather not. Dress codes, protocols, procedures, legal obligations, and company hierarchies that are all telling us how we have to behave. Think about it too much, and it can start to feel oppressive, even suffocating. If we are not careful, this is likely to throw us off our game. Instead of giving in to frustration, we can put it to good use. It can power our actions, which, unlike our disposition, become stronger and better when loose and bold. While others obsess with observing the rules, we are subtly undermining them and subverting them to our advantage. Think water. When dammed by a man-made obstacle, it does not simply sit stagnant. Instead, its energy is stored and deployed, fueling the power plants that run entire cities. Toussaint Louverture, the former Haitian slave turned general, so exasperated his French enemies that they once remarked, "Cet homme fait donc l'ouverture partout." Say, this man makes an opening everywhere. He was so fluid, so uncontainable, he was actually given the surname Louverture, meaning the opening. It makes sense. Everything in this life has been an obstacle, and he turned as many of his experiences as he could into openings. Why should troops or politics or mountains or Napoleon himself have been different? And yet we feel like going to pieces with the PowerPoint projector won't work. Instead of throwing it aside and delivering an exciting talk without notes, we stir up gossip with our co-workers instead of pounding something productive on our keyboard. We act out instead of act.